Great, great, love it. Well, let's talk a little bit more about some of the businesses that you are consulting with and how they're putting data to use. So we'll start by sort of setting the stage here by saying, many of our listeners, they may have seen, news stories, articles in recent times about shocks to supply chain disruption. But if you're like me, maybe you work in a capacity that's not directly related to supply chain issues, that can sound a little bit distant, a little bit abstract. Maybe used cars are more expensive, ships can't move around the world as fast, but I don't know, it feels a little bit distant, not very concrete. But from what I understand, some of the companies that you're working with actually care very deeply about this kind of, supply chain disruption because it has a direct impact on their business. So tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So some of the companies that we work with are in the wholesale distribution business.
Okay.
So wholesaling is similar to what many people are referring to in the retail industry, and where you buy and sell physical goods. But it's a little different because the wholesaler's main job is to buy the goods, but from the producer or manufacturer, and then distribute those and sell those to individual retailers. When people like you and me go into other places to basically purchase them.
Okay,
that's really what we do.
Yeah, so like in a wholesale business, basically you're buying things, right? You're arranging the transportation of those things to the retailers where consumers actually purchase them.
Right. So in the last couple of years, we've seen some big shocks to the system where, we have in place for transporting goods. So you've heard about supply chain disruption a lot, but in real tangible terms, what that really means to the wholesale business is that where you used to pay something like $3,000 to ship a container full of goods, you now have to pay $25,000.
Okay, wow, that's a big markup. So if all of a sudden your shipping costs are like 8 times what they were, that's obviously going to cut into your profit margin, right?
Yes, and in some cases, if you keep operating, you're going to start to lose money.
Okay, so you're sort of presented with a no-win opportunity, choices. You've got 3 choices, right? You can either stop doing business, you make no money. You can keep doing business and you start losing money, or if you try to sort of correct and just raise your prices, you kind of risk losing your customers and doing damage to your business over the long haul because you've broken those relationships.
Yeah, exactly. So what we were able to do is really use data to tackle that third option and really keep operating with a profitable margin, but doing so in a way that, really didn't alienate the customers by just randomly or arbitrarily raising prices on them.
Okay, good. So now we're getting to the data. How does the data come in? Where does that bring value here?
Well, given the prices were set at the beginning of the year, with the quick rise in transportation costs, it really required a price increase to the customers with justification. So what we did is we looked at the whole majority of the purchase orders that this customer was working on. And what we tried to do was analyze the transportation costs for things like duty, freight, and other associated costs that are tied to transportation. And what we did is we allocated those various costs based on a formula or a weighted formula to allocate these large transportation costs to the associated items that were being purchased. And then allocating those costs by weight to the item being transported to really get to that granular level.
Okay.
So the result basically ended up being we looked at each client in terms of the price that they were paying, and we compared it to the revised cost with transportation. And some would refer to that as the landed cost, but to really justify the conversation with the customer. And this provided the background for the conversation that they could have with the customer, and also provide reasoning on an interim surcharge on certain items being purchased until these excessive transportation costs came down to a normal level.
Okay.
So allowing the customer to really try to maintain a good relationship with their customers while maintaining profitability at the same time. So what we were able to do is create a system using data to allocate these increased expenses across different product lines that our customers would sell, and really provide clear information that they can share with their customers. And with this new data insight coming from Cognos, using our Quick Start solution, we were able to easily identify what we considered typically as profitable customers to now no longer being visible as profitable due to the rise in these transportation costs.
I like that. I like that because, it's like a good negotiation is not like, hey, I win, you lose, but it's, hey, together we worked on something, we found something that's a win-win situation. And like you said, the way to get there is not to have arbitrary demands, but to have a principled negotiation that both parties can buy into that process. So in this case, the data is actually what facilitated that. It's allowed the business to have the principled negotiation or conversation with their customers instead of saying, hey, sorry, price has been raised. There was actually a justification for what actually you said was a temporary surcharge, right?
Exactly. And with clear communications to their customer, it just made it easier for them to digest.
Cool. All right, great. Well, so to recap then, in times of turmoil, this case was a spike in operating expenses. The business value of data came from being able to do sort of two things. One, in the short term, to maintain their profitability by, justifying the cost. And at the same time, maintain and protect these customer relationships, which, they have to maintain in order to succeed in the long term.